He paid her every week for 7 years, then followed her one night and realized he'd never really seen her. Douglas Harlan Whitaker wasn't a man who missed much. At 58 years old, the commercial real estate world hadn't hardened him, but it had trained his eye. He could spot an underpriced duplex 3 blocks away or tell if a contractor lied just by the way their hand lingered over a signature. He was sharp, methodical, and rich enough to not bother with the little stuff. But something had shifted, and it had nothing to do with business. It was Marcia. She'd worked in his house in Scottsdale, Arizona for 7 years. Never late, never loud. Never once in all that time had she asked for time off that wasn't related to a doctor's appointment or her church. She was the kind of woman who folded your shirts with crisp corners and refilled the sugar without saying a word. You didn't notice she was there. Until one day, you did. Douglas had noticed. Not in a romantic way. That wasn't what this was. It was different. She moved slower now, like she was carrying something heavy but invisible. She didn't complain, not once. But the big clue, the thing that stuck in his mind, was the photograph. He saw it one morning by accident. She didn't know he was behind her in the kitchen. Her coat was slung over the back of a chair and her hand was in the pocket, holding it. She didn't pull it out, didn't look at it. Just stood there for a moment, her eyes distant, her breath low and shaky, like she was underwater. Then, as quickly as she froze, she moved again, back to wiping the counter, back to being invisible. But Douglas wasn't the same after that. He couldn't explain why it bothered him so much. Maybe it was because she'd been the one steady thing in his life while everything else changed. His ex-wife had moved to Utah. His son barely texted. His business partners were sharks who only smiled when they smelled blood in the water. But Marcia, she was still there. And now something was clearly wrong. It was the sighs that really got to him. The kind you hear when someone thinks no one else is listening. Small, but deep, like she was breathing through some kind of pain. Douglas wasn't nosy. He hated gossip. But this felt different. Every Thursday, she left earlier than usual. She never said why, just, I've got to be somewhere. No smile, no story, just gone. At first, he assumed it was Bible study. She was always quoting little scriptures while dusting. But then one Thursday, he happened to walk past her car parked outside the gate. She wasn't inside. The passenger door was wide open. And in the back seat, stacks of paper, old canned goods, a blanket, a few juice boxes. That wasn't for church. He didn't ask, not yet. But from that point on, he started paying attention. He noticed how she rubbed her knees at the end of her shift, how she always carried a spare pair of sneakers in a grocery bag, how she skipped lunch every day and always insisted she was fine. Douglas didn't know what to do with all this information. It was like watching a movie with the sound off. He could see something happening, but he didn't understand it. And the weirdest part? He cared. This wasn't like him. He wasn't known for empathy. He paid his people well, sure, covered dental, handed out bonuses at Christmas. But his interest usually ended at the payroll ledger. But this wasn't about business. It was about her. And that Thursday, the skies opened up. Rain poured like the heavens had lost patience with Arizona's dry streak. And for some reason, Douglas stood at the window and watched Marcia leave. This time, he didn't just wonder. He grabbed his keys. But what he didn't realize yet was that following her would turn into something far bigger than he was prepared for. Douglas hadn't followed anyone in years. Not since his son was 16 and started sneaking out the back door at midnight with a backpack full of Red Bulls and bad decisions. Back then, he followed him out of fear. Tonight felt different. This wasn't fear. This was a pull. He didn't bother changing clothes, just threw on a windbreaker and slid into his truck. The rain hadn't let up, and the roads were a mess. But Marcia's little blue Corolla was easy to spot, even through the watery blur on his windshield. She drove carefully. No music, no stops. Just quiet, focused turns through neighborhoods Douglas had never seen this close. They were only about 30 minutes from his gated home, but it felt like another world. The road signs looked tired. The corner stores had bars on the windows. The streetlights flickered like they couldn't decide whether to stay on or quit altogether. Douglas gripped the steering wheel tighter. He knew the city had rougher parts, but he didn't think she lived here. And yet, Marcia kept driving, like it was nothing, like she'd done it 100 times. She finally parked outside an old church, St. Elmo Baptist. The paint was peeling, and one of the stained glass windows had been patched up with duct tape. There were no other cars in the lot, just hers and a rusted-out minivan near the side entrance. She grabbed the grocery bag from her back seat, the one he'd seen before, and rushed inside, ducking under the awning to avoid the rain. Douglas sat in his truck, engine running, unsure what he was even doing. He had no plan. He just knew something didn't add up. But it wasn't suspicion that made him step out into the rain. It was guilt. Guilt that he'd worked alongside this woman for 7 years and never once asked her a real question. Never asked about her family, her past, her dreams. He followed the path around the side of the church. The sound of rain bouncing off the metal gutters echoed through the alley. His shoes sank into the soft mud near the steps that led to a basement door. He heard voices, children, laughing, talking. One girl said something about spelling homework. A boy asked for another slice of bread. Douglas froze. Through the narrow basement window, he could see Marcia, her back turned, setting out paper plates and pouring something from a thermos. There were about a dozen kids down there, sitting on folding chairs, sprawled on the floor. A few had backpacks beside them. They didn't look like they were visiting. They looked like they belonged. One of the older boys, probably 13, ran up to her and hugged her waist without warning. She almost spilled the soup, but didn't flinch, just smiled and rubbed his back for a second. Douglas took a step back. His mind was spinning. What is this place? Why didn't she tell anyone? How long has she been doing this? He didn't know the answers, but for the first time in a long time, he wanted to know. Because what he saw in that basement wasn't charity. It was something deeper, something desperate. That room wasn't just a place to get a meal or help with homework. It felt like the only place those kids could go where someone actually saw them. And the person doing all the seeing was the woman who had just cleaned his bathroom 3 hours ago. Douglas stood there in the rain, not knowing whether to cry or get angry. Angry at the world, at the city, at himself. He wiped his face, not sure if it was rain or something else, and walked back to his truck. He didn't go home, not yet. He just sat in the front seat staring through the foggy windshield, feeling like he'd just opened a door that couldn't be closed. He had so many questions, but one thing was already clear. He didn't know Marcia Bennett at all, but he was about to find out more than he bargained for. Douglas couldn't sleep that night, not even close. He sat in the dark living room with a glass of bourbon he barely touched. The storm had passed, but something inside him hadn't settled. That basement, those kids, the way Marcia moved through the room, not like a visitor, not like a volunteer, but like a mother to all of them. And that hug from the teenage boy? That wasn't casual. That was connection. The next morning, she showed up to work right on time, like always. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker," she said with that calm voice, setting her umbrella near the front door like it had never even rained. He watched her, not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to admiration. Still, he didn't say a word about the night before. How could he? "Hey, I followed you into the bad part of town and spied through a church window." Didn't sound exactly respectful. So instead he said, "Coffee's fresh if you want some." She paused, just for a second. "Thank you," she said softly, and walked toward the kitchen. That Thursday came again. Douglas tried to pretend he wasn't waiting for it, but by noon, he'd already looked at the clock 5 times. He made up some excuse about rescheduling a business call just to make sure he'd be home when she left. He didn't know what he was looking for, maybe a sign, or maybe just the nerve to talk to her. When she grabbed her coat and headed out, he stepped forward. "Marcia," he said. She turned, surprised. "Yes, sir." "You always leave early on Thursdays." She looked him straight in the eye. No panic, no lies, just calm. "I do. Is everything okay?" Her mouth opened, then closed. For a brief moment, he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Hesitation, maybe even weariness. "Yes, sir," she said again. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't. Douglas had already seen that with his own eyes. Still, he nodded. Let her go. He didn't follow her that time, not because he wasn't curious, but because he knew she wasn't ready. He needed to find a better way in. The following week, he made a plan. Not some dramatic gesture, just one small, careful step. He went downtown, near the area where the church was, and stopped at a local food bank. bought a stack of canned goods, some peanut butter, granola bars, anything shelf-stable. Then he added a few backpacks from a school supply store. No labels, no notes, no names. He left them in a cardboard box beside her car in the driveway the next morning, with a simple piece of paper taped to the front. For Thursday. That evening, when she came in to clean the upstairs guest room, she found him sitting at the edge of the hallway, not working, just waiting. She held the box top in her hand, silent. "I went back," he said before she could speak, "to that church." Her jaw tightened, but not in anger. He waited, let her breathe. "I didn't tell anyone," he added. "I'm not here to expose you or embarrass you. I needed to know." A long silence followed. Then finally, she sat down on the bench across from him. "You don't owe me anything," she said slowly. "You've paid me fair. You've never disrespected me, but I didn't want anyone to think I was doing it for praise or pity." "I don't," he replied. "I think you're doing something most people wouldn't have the guts for." Her face didn't soften, but her voice did. "I do what I can. They've got no one, Mr. Whitaker. Some of those kids, their folks are in prison, or they bounce around foster homes like pinballs. A few of them live in motels. One of them," she paused, "he saw his brother get shot right in front of a corner store last year." Douglas swallowed hard. "I can't fix it all," she said, "but I can give them 3 hours a week. A safe space, a warm meal, someone to check their spelling." He nodded slowly. "That's more than most." She stood up to leave. "Thank you," she added, nodding toward the box. "They'll be grateful." Douglas didn't stop her this time. He just watched her walk away, knowing everything had shifted now. But he still had no idea how deep her sacrifices really went, or how much more he was about to learn. Douglas had always been good at solving problems, buying buildings, flipping contracts, managing men twice his size, but he'd never felt so helpless watching one woman stretch herself to the bone for a dozen forgotten kids. The next Thursday, he didn't wait at the window. He didn't follow from a distance. He asked, "Marcia," he said as she packed up early again, "do you need help tonight?" She stared at him like he'd grown another head. "You're not serious." "I am," he replied without blinking. "I've got 2 arms and an SUV. That box was just the beginning." She studied him for a full 10 seconds. Then, "All right," she said, "but wear something you don't mind getting dirty." That night, the rain held off, but the wind picked up. Douglas pulled into the cracked parking lot next to her Corolla, carrying bags of apples, crackers, and notebooks. Inside the church basement, it was chaos, but the kind that had rhythm. The walls were chipped, but covered with crayon drawings and spelling lists. A whiteboard leaned against a piano with one broken key. The floor was lined with mats. There was a microwave near the old baptismal tub, and the kids lit up when Marcia walked in. "Miss B!" they shouted like she was a celebrity. Douglas stood in the doorway, awkward. He wasn't used to sticky fingers or wide-eyed stares. Marcia clapped once and raised her hand. "All right now, you know the deal. Snack first, books second." The kids fell into line, literally. Douglas helped pass out crackers and fruit slices. A girl with missing front teeth told him she liked his watch. A boy with paint on his jeans asked if he used to be in the army. "No," Douglas chuckled, "but I've survived some tough board meetings." The kids blinked at him, unimpressed. "Miss B," one girl whined, "can Mr. Doug read to us next week?" He looked up, surprised. "She means you," Marcia said with a sideways smile. He nodded. "Yeah, sure, I'd like that." After snacks, the room divided. Some kids worked on homework, others played with puzzles. One boy stared at the wall, arms crossed. Marcia knelt beside him. "DeAndre, what's going on?" He shrugged, chewing his hoodie sleeve. "No hoodie snacks today, baby," she said gently. "You mad about something?" He didn't speak. Marcia just sat with him, silent, present. Douglas watched all of it, noticed everything, the way she touched their shoulders, the way she called them baby, like it meant safety, the way she smiled with her whole face, even though he could see the weight behind her eyes. When the session ended, Marcia handed out plastic sandwich bags filled with leftovers. One girl whispered, "Miss B, my mama's working late again." Marcia handed her 2 bags. "Tell her I said hi, okay?" Douglas helped carry supplies to her car. "Do they always come here?" he asked. She nodded. "Rain or shine?" "Do their parents know?" She let out a low breath. Some do. Some don't have the capacity to care right now. He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. When they reached her car, he asked the one question that had been burning for weeks. Why do you do it? She leaned against the hood, her voice lower now. My son, she said. His name was Isaiah. He was 10 when he got sick. I spent every penny I had trying to keep him alive. 2 jobs, then 3. When he passed, I didn't know how to keep breathing, so I started helping other people's kids. I guess it was the only way I felt close to him. Douglas couldn't speak for a moment. He thought of all the times he walked past her humming while folding laundry, never once knowing she was carrying that kind of pain. Marcia, he said finally, what do you need? She shook her head. I just need time and a little bit of strength. That's all I've ever asked for. But Douglas had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to watch from the sidelines anymore. Because that night, standing in that cracked parking lot beside a woman with more heart than anyone he'd ever known, he realized something. He wasn't just learning about her. He was being changed by her. The next few weeks, Douglas showed up every Thursday. He didn't make a big deal about it. No speeches, no cameras, no grand gestures. Just him, 2 grocery bags, and a growing sense that this little church basement was more alive than anything he'd built in 3 decades of real estate. The kids started to get used to him. They called him Mr. D. They asked dumb questions. Real ones, too. Do rich people eat ramen? Why don't you got no kids here? Are your shoes made out of dolphin skin? Douglas laughed more in those 2 hours than he did the rest of the week combined, but it wasn't all joy. One Thursday, a boy named Tyson didn't show. He was always the first one in, loud, fast-talking, kind of wild. But that day, nothing. Marcia looked worried. She didn't say it, but Douglas saw it on her face. Should I go check on him? He asked. She nodded. Unit 8C, Lincoln Arms. Just be careful. That building was only 10 minutes away, but the elevator didn't work, and the hallway smelled like mold and old regret. Douglas knocked on the door, hard. No answer. He tried again. Finally, a woman opened it, hair tied back with a shoelace, eyes red and sharp. Who are you? I'm looking for Tyson, he said gently. He usually comes to the church with Miss Bennett. Her expression softened, just slightly. He ain't sick. Just didn't want to go today. He's tired. Douglas nodded. Tell him we saved his favorite crackers. The woman smirked. He'll like that. Thanks. Back at the church, he relayed the message. Marcia just sighed, not defeated, just tired, like she'd seen this 1,000 times. Later, as they cleaned up, Douglas watched her refill the plastic bins, carefully folding each child's notebook like it mattered. You ever think about stopping? He asked quietly. Marcia leaned against the folding table. I think about it all the time. Every Friday morning when my back hurts, when I open my paycheck and see what's left, when the water heater breaks, and I've got to choose between fixing it or buying crayons. So why don't you? She looked at him with eyes that didn't blink. Because nobody else is coming. Silence hung between them like a curtain. Douglas thought about all the people in his circle, the polished ones, the ones with 3 houses and nothing but opinions. He thought about how none of them would last 10 minutes in this basement. And here was Marcia, doing it every week without applause. That night, he drove home and made a call to his lawyer. I want to set up a small nonprofit, he said. Discreet, focused on education support for underserved kids. We'll start local, 1 location. You sure? The lawyer asked. This is a big commitment. I've never been more sure of anything. The following Thursday, Marcia walked into the basement and saw something different. New bookshelves, real ones, bright colors, organized bins, a microwave that didn't spark when you touched it. She looked at Douglas, speechless. I found a few donors, he said with a straight face. Turns out they care about kids too. Marcia blinked slowly. You did this? I just opened a door, he said. You've been keeping it open the whole time. She touched the edge of a shelf, running her fingers across the wood like it was a piece of gold. The kids came in minutes later shrieking with joy. One of them picked up a picture book and shouted, It's new! Like he'd never seen a crisp page in his life. Douglas stepped back, letting it all unfold. Marcia glanced at him. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know, he replied, but I couldn't not do it anymore. But what he didn't know was that Marcia still had one more truth to share, and it would shake him more than he expected. The church basement was brighter now, warmer, but not everything had been fixed. One Thursday afternoon, Douglas arrived early, a fresh box of art supplies in the back seat. As he turned the corner toward the usual side entrance, he noticed Marcia standing alone near the alley, her back to the building. She wasn't on the phone. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She was crying. Not loud sobs, not theatrical, just quiet, exhausted tears, like someone who'd been holding too much for too long and finally cracked in a sliver of solitude. Douglas froze. He didn't want to interrupt, but he couldn't turn away either. He gave her space, waited a minute, then approached slowly. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She wiped her face quickly. "Yeah, it's nothing." "It's not nothing," he said. "Talk to me." She looked at him, unsure. Then, after a beat, her words came out quick and low. "I missed rent last month, barely scraped by this one. I've been using most of my paycheck to keep this place running, and now my car's acting up. Again." Douglas took a breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcia shook her head, frustrated. "Because it's not your responsibility, Mr. Whitaker. You've already done more than I ever expected. You don't owe me a thing." "I don't owe you," he said firmly. "I care about you. You're doing more with less than anyone I've ever met." She turned away, staring out at the street. "I didn't want you to feel sorry for me, or make this about charity." "I don't feel sorry for you," he replied. "I feel ashamed that I've known you this long and never knew what you were going through." She stayed quiet. "You show up to my house every day, take care of things most people never notice, and then you leave to take care of people everyone's forgotten." Her shoulders fell. "I just wanted to do something good," she whispered. "Something Isaiah would have been proud of." Douglas nodded. "You did. You are. But Marcia, you can't keep breaking yourself to save everyone else." She turned slowly, her eyes locked with his. "So what do I do? Just stop?" "No," he said. "You let someone help you." That night, after the kids left, Douglas handed her an envelope. She frowned. "What's this?" "Your new salary. Mr. Whitaker, double what you're making now, health coverage included, and I'm hiring someone part-time to help around the house so you're not burning yourself out. That nonprofit we set up, you're on the board now, officially." She looked stunned. "I never asked for this." "I know," he said, "but you earned it. You earned all of it." Marcia didn't open the envelope right away. She just stood there, tears rising again, but not from exhaustion this time, from relief, from finally being seen. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to thank me," Douglas replied. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't carry this whole world on your shoulders alone anymore." She smiled, tired but real. "I'll try," she said. But neither of them realized just how far this one act would ripple out, until word spread about what Marcia had built. 2 months later, the basement didn't look like a basement anymore. Douglas had paid for new flooring. Nothing fancy, just smooth laminate to replace the cracked concrete. Local artists had painted murals on the walls, one of a tree with names in its leaves, another of kids holding books with stars overhead. The smell of damp drywall had been replaced with the scent of hot meals and dry erase markers. And the kids? They didn't just come after school anymore. They came on weekends. They brought their cousins, their neighbors. They dragged little siblings with backpacks too big for their shoulders. Douglas sat in the back sometimes, quietly. He didn't try to lead. He just showed up. And Marcia? She had changed, but not in the way some people do when they're handed recognition. She was still her, still the one organizing snack bins and reminding kids to wash their hands. But now there was less strain in her walk, less weight in her sighs, more light behind her eyes. She had a voice now, one that people listened to. She was invited to community panels, asked to speak at city meetings, not because she asked for the spotlight, but because the truth made its way to the right ears. And it wasn't long before a local journalist picked up the story. Headline: Housekeeper's secret after-school program becomes lifeline for dozens of kids. They wanted to interview Douglas. He declined. "This isn't about me," he said. "I just showed up late to the story. She's the story." A month after that article went viral, donations started rolling in. A used van from a dealership in Tempe, 15 laptops from a tech firm in Mesa, even a retired teacher named Mrs. Howard, who offered to come in twice a week for tutoring. Marcia looked overwhelmed, but in the best way. "This is too much," she whispered to Douglas one evening, watching a group of boys read aloud from a brand new set of chapter books. "It's not," he said. "It's exactly what you deserve." She turned toward him, her voice lower. "Isaiah would have loved this." "I think he'd be proud," Douglas said. She smiled. "I think he is." That night, as they packed up, one of the newer kids, a little girl named Ashlyn, ran back in from the parking lot, out of breath. "Miss B." Marcia turned. "What is it, baby?" Ashlyn pulled something from her backpack, a crumpled drawing. It was a picture of Marcia standing in front of a house with a heart over the roof. Kids surrounded her, all holding hands. In the corner, in messy blue crayon, it read, "Thank you for loving us when no one else did." Marcia blinked, twice, then knelt down and hugged the girl tight. Douglas stood to the side, watching. It was the kind of moment money couldn't buy. That night, he drove home in silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind where you feel full for the first time in years. He didn't care about meetings, stock forecasts, or acquisition strategies anymore. Not the way he used to. That part of his life still existed, sure, but it no longer defined him. What did? This messy, beautiful, sacred thing built in the cracks of a broken system. He'd spent years building properties that made people rich. Now he was helping build something that made people matter. The next morning, he called his son, left a message. "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while. I'd like to fix that. I've been learning a lot lately about what it means to really show up for people. Hope we can talk soon." Then he brewed a pot of coffee and waited for Marcia to arrive. She walked in at 9:02 with a paper bag of biscuits and that same coat she'd worn the first day he met her. "You look tired," he said. "I'm alive tired," she replied. "That's the good kind." He smiled. "Ready for Thursday?" he asked. "Always," she said. And that's the thing about showing up. When you start doing it for the right reasons, it stops being a chore. It becomes who you are. Because sometimes the most important difference we make in this world isn't in what we own or what we build. It's in the lives we hold up when no one else will. So if you're watching this and wondering what you can do, maybe you don't need to change the whole world. Maybe you just need to show up for someone who's been carrying too much alone.